Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista, here on YouTube, and today is another face-to-face chat, and we may do a true crime story. It's 9 o'clock here, and I only have an hour until my job starts. So yesterday I finally went and got my COVID test. Thank God. I will use Walgreens from now on. It's quick and easy. Was able to do it on the lunch break. I don't have the results yet because, you know, it's a little more thorough with that test. So I'm hoping today, that's where my stepfather, my mom said, had his test done, and he had his results like midnight the second day. So I'm hoping like midnight tonight or early tomorrow morning, because I'm running out of time here. So I feel fine. So yesterday we had the arbitration. Everything was going all right until the end of the day. So we have 4 editors, 2 proofreaders per day for the arbitration. And one of the proofreaders doesn't work with us normally. However, we've been doing this arbitration. We are now in the 6th week of doing it. And the proofreaders proofread the same units every single day. So their job really is probably the easiest, I would think, of anybody's job. It has happened no less than 5 times. The person that doesn't work with us normally, at the end of the day, when the day ends, I always say, they're done for the day. Well, this proofreader will be like, okay, I'm done. And she's not done. She still usually has one more unit at the very end, the last 5 or 6 pages to do. And most of the time, I always wind up scoping that, editing that. And this has happened so many times. And a couple times I haven't caught it because I'm doing 100 things at the same time. And the other proofreader has had to proofread that unit. So I said, no, you're not done. I said, you still have blah, 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 to blah, blah, blah to proof. I'm still scoping it. I'm not done yet. And she's like, well, invite me back to the file, because she got out of the file. And I said, just forget it. I said, I can't, because my boss is the only one that can invite us to the file. I said, I'll have the other proofreader read it. I said, I don't understand how this continues to happen. You can love this. She comes back and says, every day you have an attitude with me, please stop. I literally felt my head explode at my desk. Are you kidding me right now? Me? Stop? So I write back. Now, mind you, these messages the whole team can see, and I don't care, because I said, this has been addressed no less than 5 times. This arbitration, it's frustrating. I said, I repeat myself over and over and over. I said, the other proofreaders shouldn't have to proofread it, and I shouldn't have to keep track of who was proofreading what. I said, but don't fret, because I'm going to address this with our boss, and you can discuss it with her. Because, you know, there gets to be a point where I can't handle it, where I've gone as far as I can with trying to resolve it. And so immediately I sent my boss an email, and I took screenshots of the messages so she could see exactly what was said. And I'm done. I'm just so done. And we still have so much more of this still to go. And so there's another issue that keeps happening too, where this person puts messages in the transcript directly instead of in a hidden comment. When you put it in the transcript directly, everyone can see it, including the attorneys and the arbitration panel, who have a real-time feed to this transcript every day. And I have brought this up many, many, many times. Now, if you were working for someone that you don't work with all the time, wouldn't you write these things down and have like a piece of paper that you pull out every day and peruse it? You know, one of the problems is that I also think everyone works like I do, and they don't, obviously. So yeah, My give a damn has busted. You ever heard that country song? Yeah, my give a damn is busted. So that was a lovely end to the day, and my day was about 15 minutes longer because I had to stop and send that fucking email. And she just types weird random stuff in the group message, and I'm just ignoring it. That's going to be my tactic. Because you have an attitude. Yeah. I was hissing when I was telling Bill. Hissing like a cat. I did stitch last night, though, for the first time in almost a week, so that was good. Okay. So, today's story is called Murder in a Small Town. I want to say it's colon. It's spelled like colon, C-O-L-O-N. Colon, Nebraska is a tiny enclave of just over 100 souls. Wait a minute. I have to send this email. Let me just send this. Why my boss couldn't send it to our entire team, I have no idea. Okay. Colon, Nebraska is a tiny enclave of just over 100 souls, a typical rural community where everyone knows everyone else and neighbors look out for one another. Crime, at least serious crime, was almost unknown here. Murder? In the summer of 2003, when our story takes place, there hadn't been a homicide in Colon for over 40 years. Wow. The biggest problem for the Saunders County Sheriff's Department was illegally parked truckers. Okay. Oh, by the way, side note. One of my biggest pet peeves is tags and sweaters and shirts. I spent 10 minutes with the seam ripper getting the tag out of this sweater because I just got this sweater from Torrid, which I really love. Hate the tags. They itch my skin. Okay. But all of that was to change on the morning of June 30th, 2003. That was the day that deputies were called to the home of 66-year-old retiree Sharon Erickson and found her dead on the cold floor of her garage in a pool of her own congealed blood. At first, the officers thought this was a suicide. A revolver lay on the ground just a few feet from the corpse as though it had fallen there after slipping from the victim's hand. The problem with that theory was that the idea of suicide did not gel with the Sharon Erickson that each of the officers knew. Remember, this is a small town. Sharon was a well-liked, vivacious, and friendly woman, Saunders County born and raised, and a pillar of the community. She had worked for the bulk of her adult life in the county treasurer's office and had remained active in community affairs after her retirement. What possible idea could she have had to kill herself? Well, we know she didn't because it wouldn't be a story. None, as it turned out. The gun on the ground had not ended Sharon Erickson's life. It hadn't been fired and wasn't even loaded. Sharon had suffered a far more brutal death than a gunshot to the head. An autopsy would reveal that she had been severely beaten, suffering a broken nose and fractures to her cheek and eye socket. To break someone's cheek and eye socket, you got to hit them pretty hard. That must have been extremely painful. Her arms were also badly bruised with the injuries most likely inflicted as she tried to ward off her attacker. The fight, though, had been in vain. Bruising to her neck indicated that Sharon had ultimately been strangled. A crushed larynx suggested that her killer had exerted downward pressure on her throat, probably with a shoe or boot. Jesus Christ. Either way, she had died of asphyxiation. She had also been sexually assaulted, either as she lay dying or after she was already dead. Wow, so if the murder wasn't bad enough. Word of the savage murder sent shockwaves through the tiny community, sparking speculation as to who might have done such a terrible thing. Most of the locals were of the opinion that the killer was an outsider, most probably one of the truck drivers who passed through or overnighted in Colon. Sharon had clashed with them often enough, calling the sheriff to report illegal parking or sometimes going head-to-head with them herself, armed with little more than a flashlight. Had she chosen the wrong trucker to confront? Had she been killed as a result? Possibly. Perhaps, but for now, the police were looking closer to home. They had two suspects in mind. The first of those was Mark Dolan, the local postmaster. What? Mark Dolan had drawn attention to himself by showing up at the crime scene on the morning of the murder. He had peppered investigators with questions, most of them relating to what evidence they had found and whether they had any suspects. Then, after being told to leave, he asked an odd question: "Are you going to arrest me?" What? The second suspect was 27-year-old James Mars, who lived with his parents directly across the road from Sharon Erickson. Remember, when you're murdered, it's most of the time somebody you know. A high percentage, anyway. Mars was well known to local law enforcement as a troublemaker, usually when he was under the influence. Asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, he said that he had been drinking at a local bar with a woman named Handi Clamp. Kemp later backed up his story, saying that Mars had left at closing time around 2:15 a.m. This was verified by Mars's mother, who said that he had arrived home sometime between 2:15 and 2:45. So that seemed to rule him out as a suspect, but the police asked him to submit to a DNA swab anyway, and he did so without hesitation. In the early morning hours of July 1st, 24 hours after the murder, the sheriff's department received a call from James Mars reporting that there was a semi-truck idling outside Sharon Erickson's home. Officers raced to the scene but arrived to find that the trucker had already left. Mars was, however, able to describe the vehicle, saying that it was a red Peterbilt with a distinctive eagle design on the front license plate. Unfortunately, Mars could not recall the license number. The police put out an APB on the truck but did not hold out much hope of finding it. In any case, they were focused now on a single suspect, Mark Dolan, the postmaster. So the head of the fucking post office is who did this? So Dolan was brought in for questioning and quizzed about his relationship with the dead woman. He vehemently denied any impropriety, insisting that they had been no more than friends. The police were not so sure. They had a working theory that Dolan and Sharon had been lovers. Ooh, lovers. Perhaps Sharon had wanted to end the relationship. Perhaps Dolan had taken it badly and killed her as a result. Would he be prepared to give a sample of his DNA? Dolan said that he would. Would he submit to a polygraph? Again, the postmaster replied that he was willing to do so, and that gave the investigators pause because perhaps they were barking up the wrong tree. And so the cops got down to working on their secondary suspect, the elusive truck driver. They began visiting trucking companies, truck stops, gas stations, asking about a red semi with an eagle decal on the front license plate. On July 11th, those efforts finally bore fruit. The semi had been spotted at a local truck stop. Officers raced to the location and roused the driver from his cab. Shown a picture of Sharon Erickson, the trucker admitted that he knew her and had clashed with her several times in the past after she had ordered him to move his truck from the streets of Colon. He said she was a real ball breaker. That was his quote. He denied, however, that he had caused her any harm, claiming that he had been on his way to Tulsa, Oklahoma on the night of the murder. He was then asked for a DNA sample and told the officers to go to hell. Okay, then. By now, the Saunders County Police were leaning their case heavily on obtaining a DNA match, but they were about to receive a severe blow to this strategy. On August 5th, 2003, the state lab reported that they had been unable to retrieve any foreign DNA from Sharon Erickson's body. This was devastating for the investigation and meant that Sharon's killer would most likely get away with murder. The last hope rested with the DNA lab at the University of Nebraska Medical Center in Lincoln. The problem was that the facility had a backlog several months long. Jesus, really? A long and frustrating wait lay ahead for the investigators. Months? When there was a murder investigation, what? But they had plenty to occupy themselves with in the meantime. Over the last few months, a veritable crime wave had rolled through the area. Numerous thefts had been reported, all of them relating to supplies of anhydrous ammonia. This is a chemical used by farmers to make fertilizer. It can also be put to a more insidious use, the production of methamphetamine. Ooh. Which got the investigators thinking, might this have to do with the murder? Could Sharon, while conducting one of her one-woman crusades, have seen or heard something related to the drug trade had she been killed as a result? So in order to explore this possibility, sheriff's deputies carried out a series of raids on locations known to be frequented by meth heads. They had no particular interest in arresting addicts. What they wanted to know was whether anyone had heard anything about the Erickson murder. They got the same story time and time again. The old lady had been killed by someone close to her, someone she considered a friend. If true, That brought the investigators back full circle to the original suspect, Mark Dolan, the postmaster. And there was soon a second piece of intelligence putting Dolan in the frame. The police heard a strange story from Sharon Erickson's sister, Connie. Connie had been clearing out Sharon's yard and had held a yard sale to get rid of her sister's things. Mark Dolan had shown up at the sale, but had been interested in only one item, Sharon's mattress. Sus, right? Why was he so intent on purchasing this item? Could it be that the mattress held secrets, DNA secrets, that would prove that he and Sharon had been more than friends after all? Ooh. Brought back in for questioning, Dolan reiterated his earlier position. He insisted that he was a happily married man and that nothing inappropriate had ever happened between him and Sharon. Doesn't matter a fucking lick of nothing that he was married. He'd only wanted the mattress to furnish his guest room, he said. Dolan was now subjected to the polygraph he agreed earlier to and came away far from exonerated. His results were inconsistent all over the map. Still, it wasn't evidence though, right? The police were forced to let him go and wait for the DNA results. Once those were in, they were sure they would have him. Months passed. Remember the backlog, right? With a palpable tension hanging over the town. One among their number was a killer, and in the opinion of most, that person was Mark Dolan. It must have been an incredibly uncomfortable time for the postmaster. Yeah. Then on April 14th, there was finally some good news. The word was in from UNMC. They had found foreign DNA on Sharon Erickson's body in a minute quantity of semen. A few days later, there was even better news. They had a match, though. It wasn't Mark Dolan, it was James Mars. Oh. This was hardly the outcome that investigators had expected. Mars had been a low priority suspect from the start, mainly because of the alibi that he had offered. But how solid was that alibi? Officers visited Vanessa Kemp again and pressed her on the issue, warning her of the consequences of lying. And it didn't take long before Kemp retracted, now admitting that Mars had left the bar an hour earlier than she initially said. According to Vanessa, Mars had called her the following morning and asked her to cover for him should the cops come asking. She had assumed it was because he didn't want to be slapped with yet another DUI. With Mars' alibi exposed as a lie and a DNA match linking him to the victim, a warrant was issued for his arrest. The problem was that Mars had quit town 4 months earlier and no one seemed to know his whereabouts. That's my Instacart order. He was tracked days later to Lincoln, Nebraska and arrested there on May 4th, 2004. Initially, he denied killing Sharon, but after the police showed him the results of the DNA test, he broke down and confessed. So, according to Mars, here is his story. He had been drinking heavily that night and had tried cocaine for the first time. After leaving the bar, he had started thinking about his life and about how he was perpetually broke and going nowhere. Then he got to thinking about his neighbor, the rich retiree Sharon Erickson. Remember, Mars lived across the street from her, right? Why should she be living the life when he had nothing? Because she earned it? In his drink and drug-addled brain, he decided to redress the balance by robbing her. So after stopping at his house and fetching a chisel, Jesus Christ, he headed across the street to the Erickson residence. Before entering the property, he cut the phone line. He then used the chisel to force open a screen on the back door, but found it useless in opening the door itself. He therefore applied his boot to the handle, causing the door to fly open. Unfortunately for Mars, the ruckus had awakened Sharon and she confronted him in the hallway. Sharon had a gun and she pointed it at him, ordering him to leave her house immediately. Faced with the weapon, Mars meekly complied. Had he just kept walking across the street and gone to bed, the matter might have ended there. But then Mars heard the garage door opening and turned to see Sharon walking in that direction. He concluded that she was going for her car, that she had realized the phone was cut off and had decided to drive to the sheriff's office to report the break-in. He would be arrested and with his record would probably end up doing time, and he couldn't allow that to happen. And so Mars jogged back across the street, entered the garage, and attacked Sharon. Had the gun she was holding been loaded, Sharon might have been able to defend herself, but the revolver, as we heard about when the police found it, held no bullets and was easily swatted out of her hand. Mars then struck the elderly woman several times in the face, beating her to the ground. He started throttling her, keeping up the pressure on her neck until she passed out. He was exhausted by now, so exhausted that he couldn't finish the job with his hands. Instead, he snuffed out the last remnants of Sharon Erickson's life by standing on her throat. I just don't know how you do this to another human being. James Mars had just admitted to a truly horrendous crime, the savage murder of a defenseless woman. But there was one detail that Mars would not concede. Despite evidence to the contrary, he refused to confess to sexual assault. Remember, she had semen on her. In fact, Mars was so determined to keep the details of his vile act a secret that he agreed to plead guilty to second-degree murder. Well, it's all out in the open now if these people read this story. Normally, a suspect would look for a plea bargain in these circumstances, but Mars wasn't interested in negotiating a lesser sentence. He was prepared to accept any punishment to prevent his dirty secret from becoming public knowledge. The sentence he received turned out to be the maximum, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Most of these crimes are just so utterly senseless and unnecessary. Why should she have all the money and he have nothing? Because you're a drug addict and she had... Okay. I did have someone buy me 5 coffees yesterday. Rhonda. And she says, hope this brightens your day a little bit. Sorry you are having a really shitty time right now. Love your videos, chats, and of course the new hairdo. Rhonda, thank you so very much. I completely, utterly appreciate the coffees. Absolutely. It goes into my PayPal account and just helps me, buy stuff. So I'm going to end this here, guys. I hope you all have a great Tuesday. I'm going to make sure my day is better than yesterday. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.